After extensive research, I have found historical literature that suggests Houston and Galveston were centers for slave trade in Texas well into the emancipation of all slaves, which was announced in Galveston by Union General Gordon Granger on June 19, 1865. My research led me to sources like a slave manifest dating back to 1838, departing from New Orleans and arriving to the port of Houston. Real people like former slave Minty Maria Miller from the ex-slave narratives of 1937. She recalls as a little girl being stood up on a woodblock, being bidded on, and sold at a slave market in Houston. She was sold to Tom Johnson of Lynchburg, who stayed on Buffalo Bayou in a riverboat during the Civil War. Minty even claims to have watched the Confederates prepare ships for war to reclaim Galveston from the Federal Army. I also found former slave Mary Armstrong, who remembers at 17 years old being freed in 1863 from Missouri. She was put on the back of a boat in New Orleans, arrived in Galveston, and got on a smaller steamboat to Buffalo Bayou in Houston. It is in Houston where Mary's former owners told her to show her freedom papers to the whites, or someone might try to sell her. These particular sources led me to believe that slaves were brought through Allen's Landing, and that Houston was indeed a center for slave trade. In Galveston's Rosenberg Library, I was immediately introduced to Jean Lafitte, a known pirate who would smuggle stolen slaves from places like Cuba through the port of Galveston and sell them in an illegal Galveston slave trade market from about 1817 to 1822. This was before Texas gained independence from Mexico and slavery was illegal. In the museum section of the Rosenberg Library, I came across a list of black codes in which slaves had to live by or suffer consequences. The black codes on top of a Galveston newspaper article I found describing the lashings of someone in violation of a code made my historical experience more surreal in learning the reality of what slaves went through. This research project opened my eyes to not only the history of U.S. slavery, but also the history of slavery in two of Texas' best cities, Houston and Galveston.